Hello, welcome to the Craft House Magic Set of tutorials. My name's Ellie and today I'm going to show you how I make these little owls. Some time ago I found a free pattern to make this tiny little owl on the internet, but I can't find the link any longer and they don't seem to have any English instructions of how to do it, so I thought I'd do a little tutorial to show you how I've made them. I've also adapted the pattern to make a larger version like this. So what I'm going to do is attach a link down below so that you can download this worksheet to cut out the pattern pieces. So these pieces at the bottom are to make the small version of the owl. You've got the body piece, the tummy, and you've got the base and also the pattern piece to make the right size to cut out a piece of card to go in the bottom. Here are the pieces to make the large version. Here's the body, here's the tummy, and then you've got the base piece of fabric and then the template to cut out the card for the right size to make the larger version. So today I'm going to show you how I put the larger version together, but the smaller version is exactly the same. I just thought it might be easier for you to see the larger version. So what you'll need to do is cut out the pieces. So the body piece and the base piece are all cut out of the same fabric. This is obviously, the body is this part and the base is this part here, so I've chosen a nice sort of Hessian fabric, and then I've chosen a contrast floral fabric to do his tummy, which is this bit here. You will also need a couple of buttons for the eyes, a piece of card to keep his base nice and stiff so he stands up nice and flat, some thread, some hand sewing thread to sew the base onto the main body of the owl, but I'll also be doing some stitching on the machine as well. You could always do all the stitching in by hand if you haven't got a sewing machine. And then you need some thread to sew on the eyes and also to do the nose detail as well. I find a pair of scissors to be handy, and I'm also using some polyester stuffing to go inside him, but you could always use some lavender as well to make him smell nice. So what I'm going to do is join the main body and the tummy piece together first. So you can tell which is the base of the body piece by finding the longest edge. So if I fold this down, you can see that the side panels are shorter than the base, so you know that this is the bottom of the owl. And then I take the tummy piece and I make sure that I've got right sides together. It might be easier to see which is the right side on yours, and I'll line up the bottom corner here and I'm going to start stitching these two sides together. So on the machine I'll start stitching here and then work the fabric around so that it fits nicely so that the two edges meet, and then I'm going to stitch to the 1/4 inch from this edge, and I'll show you how I do that now on the machine. Right, so we've now got the machine ready to use, and I've set my stitch length to 1.5 millimeters. I think with any sort of stuffies it's nice to have a shorter stitch length so that you haven't got any of the stuffing poking out. And I'm going to line up these two edges like I said before and start doing a straight stitch down the edge. So when I start stitching, I'm going to do a back stitch at the beginning. I like to hold on to my thread just to start with to stop the thread from bunching up under the foot. And then as I work around this edge, I'm going to line up the floral fabric with the edge of the body piece, and I'm going to work till 1/4 inch from the end and then do a back stitch there. So your first piece is attached here. You then take your belly piece to the opposite side of the body fabric and I find it easier to stitch it from this side here. So I'm lining up the beginning of the row again. I'm going to do a back stitch. So I'm going to do a back stitch here, and then I'm going to make sure that my fabric's lined up. And just keep stopping and making sure that you don't stitch too far. And I'm just using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. This is the fiddliest bit. Once you've done this bit, it's quite easy, but you might find it easier to hand stitch this part if you're not so confident with the sewing machine. So I'm just going to turn it up underneath and make sure that the seam allowance is pushed away from where you're going to be stitching. It makes it a little bit more fiddly doing it through the camera here. And I'm just going to go right up to where that stitching was. And then back stitch when I get to the top. There we are. So I've stitched to the same point from both sides here. I don't know if you can see that. And then we're going to be folding this together so that you've got the belly piece folded over, and you're going to be stitching 1/4 of an inch from the edge to close up this gap at the top of the owl. So there we go. So I've stitched 1/4 of an inch all the way around there, so you have a cone shape, and that is actually all the machine stitching that you need to do. The rest is all hand stitching. So I will go back to my previous setup now. So here we have the little cone shape that we've made, and I'm just going to take the scissors and trim a bit of the seam allowance from this top portion. Don't go too close, you want to leave about 1/8 of an inch from the stitch line. I don't think you can see the stitch line very well here. But it's about 1/8 of an inch away. And then I'm going to turn this the right way out. Sometimes you might find it easier to use a tool like this. Anything that's got a pointed edge that's not too sharp so it won't poke a hole in the beak of your owl. I then finger press the seams so that they're nice and neat, and then you can fold down the top bit to form a little beak. So I've already threaded 2 strands of black cotton here to make the embroidery for the nose here, and then I use the same thread to sew the buttons on as well. So I'm going to do a quilter's knot in this thread. I hold the thread in the same finger as the needle, wrap it round a few times, keep that tight, and then run that knot to the end of the thread. So I take the needle to the inside of the owl and just poke the needle through the end of his beak, and then the knot is secured on the inside. And then you can do some stitches to form the beak shape like I have here. So just go in through the belly fabric, and up through the beak section so that you're highlighting the end of his beak. You could just do a little tack stitch if you weren't keen on trying to stitch the beak as well. So I'm going from the same point on the belly portion to different points on the sort of beak section. It's difficult to do it neatly when I'm looking through the camera here, but you can get yours neater than this. So it's a sort of a satin stitch. So even though that's not super neat, you can still see that it's in the shape of the beak. And then once you've done the stitches to your satisfaction, I'm just going to do one more to fill that gap in there. Once you've got that stitch to your satisfaction, you can then run the thread to the inside of the owl, and then I'm going to knot that off just to secure it a little bit. There we go. And then I'm actually going to run that thread, even though I've knotted it, to where I'm going to put his eyes. So this one I've done his eyes still on the belly fabric but over there, so I'll run my needle still on the inside of the fabric over to the position where I'm going to attach the eye. And then I like these buttons with 4 holes in because I think the cross looks a little bit like an eye. And I'm going to carefully position those buttons so that they look like the owl's eyes. Do a couple of stitches so that you can see a little cross shape. Careful you don't go through the fabric at the back, you're just going through into the centre of the owl. And then I'm going to do a little knot on the back of his eye, just so that if one eye comes off, all the other stitching on the inside isn't going to unravel. Find that that's better. And then, oops, I'm going to run my thread to the other side. I'll try and make sure I'm going in roughly a symmetrical position to the other side of the beak. And put his other button eye on. And then you want to knot your thread off for the last time. You could of course start knotting it and do the eyes completely separate, but I just run the thread through the inside of the owl because this is going to be all stuffed at the end. I'm just making a little knot there. I'm actually going to knot that again. Doesn't matter that it's a little bit messy on the inside, and then cut that thread. So his facial features are finished. You can see on this one I've used a different shade of purple thread, but you can use what you like. And I've also used blue eyes on this one, blue buttons as eyes. So it's really up to you what sort of features you like. But that's all the features finished, and it's time to start stuffing him. So I just put in a little bit of a time of the polyester stuffing. And just keep pushing the wadding inside so you get a nice plump little owl. You could have a skinnier one if you wanted to, it's up to you. And you can always add some stuffing before you've finished sewing around the edge. So I like to do the base bit first. So you're going to be sewing your material for the base around your piece of cardboard. So I'll take some thread that matches the material that's going to go well, for the base, and I've put a knot in the end of this thread, and I'm going to be running stitch all the way around the outside. So once you've done the running stitch around the outside, you can place your piece of cardboard into the centre, and then you can slowly and gently pull that thread so it goes around there. You could actually, if you wanted to, use a fabric glue to stick this to the cardboard, because you're actually going to be sewing this to the base of your owl, so if it comes unstuck it doesn't matter. But I've just used a tacking stitch, and I'm going to knot that there just to keep it in place. There we go. So I'm going to make another knot in my thread, and I'm going to do the same tacking stitch all around the base of the owl. You need to have a thread that's reasonably strong for this, because you don't want it breaking when you're trying to pull on your stitches to cinch in the base of the owl. You don't want to stitch too close to the edge either, because the fabric may fray and your stitches will come loose. There we are, I've stitched all the way around the base of the owl, and then I'm going to carefully start to pull this in, and I want to cinch it in enough so that when you put your base on, it covers up any loose fabric, so that you don't end up with any edges of frayed fabric sticking out. So I'm going to cinch mine in about that much. So I'm going to knot that in place so that it is all completely enclosed. And again, you could add some more stuff in there if you wanted to make him a bit fatter, or her a bit fatter. I think I tend to cut the thread here and rejoin again, just because it's just a little bit easier. You don't have to, you can just leave it attached if you want to. So I've put another knot in that thread, and I'm attaching my thread to the inside of this cardboard. I'll place it onto the material, onto the base, so you can see how neat that's going to come out. And then I'm going to hand stitch all the way around there. With some invisible stitches really. So I'm taking a little chunk out of the main body of the owl, and then some out of the base. So you want to keep your stitches relatively close together, because you might have gaping areas otherwise. So there we are, we've stitched all the way around. I'm just going to make a couple of knots in there. And I tend to, after I've knotted, I tend to feed the thread into the body of the owl so that you're burying it and it won't come undone. So there you have your little owl. So you could do little features, you could have a little bow tie if you wanted to, or change the colour of the eyes, and you could always put a little piece of felt to make it more like an eye behind your little button there. So there's lots of ideas that you could use. So you could make a male or a female version or little baby versions. It's completely up to you, and you can use any sort of scrap pieces of fabric that you've got lying around. So I hope you enjoyed the little tutorial. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more. Happy crafting! Bye!